Well, greetings from the cottage garden. I just got out of school for the year. Still have some work to do and I'll be going in and out, but I finally have some time to get some work done in the cottage garden, and I really needed to do that because things were starting to take a hit from neglect. But first thing that I wanted to talk to you today about was growing in these non-woven fabric containers. Now, I have about 60 of these, and I have 60 of these because I don't want to tear up my yard and put in rows. I also don't want to build 15 more or 20 more raised beds, because at some point, we're going to move from here, and I don't want to spend weeks trying to tear up or move raised beds. I don't know that people would actually want them in here. But so let's talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of these. So these are my cherry tomatoes, and cherry tomatoes they do really well in these. And you can see that my cherry tomatoes here, I've got a bunch of different varieties, but this is one called an apple yellow, and they just grow tons of fruit all summer long, and they're pretty good in terms of disease resistance. So you can see you probably can't see it, but there's a little bit of disease on there. But cherry tomatoes do really well on these, primarily because they don't suffer from something called blossom end rot. Now, the determinate slicing tomatoes will do okay in these, but they don't do as well as they would do if you had them in a raised bed or in rows. But we'll take a look at them here. And again, some of these are varieties that I've grown in the past, and they do really well. Others are varieties that I'm trying out. But you can see that I've trimmed these plants up a lot because they had a lot of disease in them. But you can see that there's fruit on them. And in some cases, the fruit looks just beautiful. Nice looking tomatoes on here. The problem is that in these containers, the fruit tends to have a problem with something known as blossom end rot. Now, blossom end rot is caused by two things. It's caused by a lack of calcium in the soil, and it's caused by uneven watering. Now, I use really good compost in these and compost potting soil mixed with other amendments. It's high quality in these containers. There is definitely not a shortage of calcium, but just in case there is, I do add some additional calcium into the mix in terms of some organic types of supplements. But I still have a problem with blossom end rot. The problem is that, especially in these black ones, and it's really hard to find anything any other color, it's hard to maintain a nice even soil moisture in here. So it goes from drying out really quickly, you water it, drying out, watering it, and that is a perfect recipe for blossom end rot. And it seems to hit them a whole lot more early in the season when you're putting the tomatoes on. But I'm going to be honest with you, I lose probably half of my tomatoes sometimes, depending upon the variety, to blossom end rot, the slicing tomatoes, because it's just so hard to get the watering correct in these. Some varieties, like I said, do better than others, but I've already lost probably 10 tomatoes to blossom end rot, and you can start seeing the blossom end rot on there even before they start to turn red. The other problem with these containers is that the soil in them tends to heat up a little bit more, and it has sometimes a problem with more disease than you might normally find in a bed if it's a bed that hasn't had tomatoes growing in it before. But like I said, look, I get a lot of good tomatoes out of here. It's just a lot of work to get the tomatoes out of here so that, without having them suffer from blossom end rot. So you notice too that I've thinned these out a lot. In some cases, some of these tomatoes have a little bit, have somewhat too little foliage on the top. And in this case, I may have to actually put some shade cloth because we don't want them to get sun scalded. But you do want to make sure at this time of year that you are doing a little bit of trimming on your tomatoes on the branches that are not fruit bearing, so that you can have a great airflow through here. Now you can see that these are healthy tomatoes. They're not. I mean, they're doing really well in these, and I've trimmed them up. Got a little bit of problem down on this one on the end. This is a variety called Stellar that I haven't tried before. Looks like we're getting a bit of leaf curl on here. We'll keep an eye on it, see how it's going. Now contrast these to the ones that are in the beds. Now granted, this is a different variety, but they're all very similar type varieties. And what I did with this one today is I went through and I really trimmed it up underneath so that I could get some airflow up under here. Now this is really important for a number of different reasons. Airflow dries things out so you don't have moisture building up in there, but it also it just enables the fruit and just to cool off in here. You don't want to have it hot and humid inside where it's going to just foster diseases. The other thing that it does is it helps you to see whether or not you're starting to have some issues with chewing insects. So down here, you can see that I have some chewing insects. Now, there's a particular type of caterpillar, a boring caterpillar, that will chew on the leaves, but then when it gets done with the leaves or bored with the leaves, it'll go to the fruit, and just in a matter of days, it will just be chowing down on your fruit. And if you're not checking every single day, which I don't have time to check every single day, then you're going to have issues with them just tearing up your fruit. And once they get in there, they're really hard to get rid of. I do use a spray called Spinosad. I'm going to hit these tonight with a Spinosad mix to try to get these chewing insects under control, because I've seen some stuff here to indicate that I'm having a few start to show up, and that should help keep them at bay. You can also use neem. Neem doesn't work as well as Spinosad when it comes to those. Neem is more of a, it smells bad and they don't want to go in it type thing. So in this particular case, I'm going to hit it with some Spinosad, and I'm also going to hit some of these plants low down on the branches with some copper. Now, copper is, by some people, considered organic, and by others, it's not considered organic. But we live in Zone 8B South, and if you don't use something like copper, and you have large amounts of tomatoes like this, then you really are going to have it's going to be a downhill fight, a battle against the different diseases that you have here. So you can see that these tomatoes as well, I went through and I cut them out so that I could get some airiness through there. Now these need to be propped up a little bit more. I'm going to go in and run another string on my weave, but I wanted to show you this one right here, because this is a great example of how one tomato out of all of them can get diseased. And these are all the same variety of tomato. You can see this is big and lush, it's got lots of fruit, and this has got some great fruit on it. You can see that the plant is stunted, and I've had to cut a lot of it off because it was damaged with disease. And it was some kind of black fungal disease. There's other diseases on there too. Most of the time this year, you're at this, in the south, you're going to have, the main ones are going to be septoria, bacterial spot, and something called blight. You have early blight and you have late blight. But if you look over here, here's my peppers. There was a tomato here that was suffering, and I just had to yank it out because there was nothing on there that was worth saving, whereas that other one, I'm going to try to get those tomatoes out of it. And down here, this variety known as Daytona, they're starting to get some disease on them as well. I've never grown Daytona before, but they produce a mass amount of fruit. You can see down in here, just tons of fruit. But if the fruit doesn't make it to fruition, then it's not going to be really worthwhile. So you can see, though, that they tend to be much richer in the beds than they are in the containers. And depending upon whether or not I've tried to grow tomatoes here or not, usually I'll have less issue with disease as well.